Welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. This week we focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. What does this mean for the world? All that's on the way. We get your views on the issues. Plus, we have Africa's top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I am Julie Gishuru. In September 2015, world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This includes a set of 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, to end poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and tackle climate change, among other things.
The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is aimed at transforming our world. The Sustainable Development Goals are: 1. No poverty. 2. Zero hunger. 3. Good health and well-being. 4. Quality education. 5. Gender equality. 6. Clean water and sanitation. 7. Affordable and clean energy. 8. Decent work and economic growth. 9. Industry, innovation and infrastructure. 10. Reduced inequalities. 11. Sustainable cities and communities. 12. Responsible consumption and production. 13. Climate action. 14. Life below water. 15. Life on land. 16. Peace, justice and strong institutions. 17. Partnerships for the goals.
On the show this week, we attempt to understand those Sustainable Development Goals, and we listen to speeches by Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, President Barrack Obama, the President of the United States of America, and President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya. The SDGs were adopted at the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit being held in New York, USA. They are intended to build on the Millennium Development Goals that the world committed to achieving by the end of 2015. Enormous progress has been made on the MDGs, showing the value of a unifying agenda underpinned by goals and targets. But despite some success, MDGs failed to consider the root causes of poverty and overlooked gender inequality, as well as the holistic nature of development. The goals made no mention of human rights and did not specifically address economic development. The new global goals and the broader sustainability agenda go much further than the MDGs, addressing the root causes of poverty and the universal need for development that works for all people. Every country will be expected to work towards achieving them. So what exactly are the Sustainable Development Goals, and how can developing countries contribute to their prosperity and dignity for all using these goals? Let's go straight to New York and hear from global leaders.
The 70th session of the General Assembly has opened with a towering achievement: the adoption of the 2030 Agenda, including 17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sight: an end to extreme poverty by 2030, a life for peace and dignity for all. What counts now is translating promises on paper into change on the ground. We owe this and much more to the vulnerable, the oppressed, the displaced, and forgotten people in our world. We owe this to a world where inequality is growing, trust is fading, and impatience with leadership can be seen and felt far and wide. We owe this to succeeding generations, in the memorable words of the Charter. Excellencies, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, suffering today is at heights not seen in a generation. 100 million people require humanitarian assistance, immediate humanitarian assistance. At least 60 million people have been forced to flee their home or their countries. The United Nations has asked for nearly $20 billion to meet this year's needs, six times the level of a decade ago. UN humanitarian agencies and our partners are braving difficult conditions to reach people. This year, in which we mark the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, we must heed to the call of the Charter and hear the voices of we the peoples. This is how we can overcome the grim realities of the present and seize the remarkable opportunities of our era.
Development is threatened by war. This should be a simple proposition, but it bears repeating. It is no coincidence that half of the people living in extreme poverty around the world live in places afflicted by chronic violence and conflict. Today, some 60 million men, women, and children have been forced from their homes, many by conflicts in the Middle East and in Africa. Now, these are humanitarian crises and refugees that we cannot ignore, and we have to deliver the urgent aid that is needed right now. And those countries that can must do more to accommodate refugees, recognizing that those children are just like ours. But our efforts must be matched by the hard work of diplomacy and reconciliation to end conflicts that so often tear societies apart. And as I said earlier, war and conflict is more likely to arise where we have bad governance, and we have high inequality, and we have discrimination against minority groups and ethnic groups, and we have low educational levels. So these things are all related. And finally, development is threatened by climate change. And I want to thank the Secretary General for the extraordinary leadership and work that he's done on this issue. All of our countries will be affected by a changing climate. But the world's poorest people will bear the heaviest burden from rising seas and more intense droughts, shortages of water and food. We will be seeing climate change refugees. As His Holiness Pope Francis has rightly implored the world, this is a moral calling. In just 2 months, the world has an opportunity to unite around a strong global agreement. I saw President Hollande walk in a few moments ago. We are going to be converging in Paris. With his leadership and the leadership of every world leader, we need to establish the tools and financing to help developing nations embrace clean energy, adapt to climate change, and ensure that there's not a false choice between economic development and the best practices that can save our planet. We can do the same at the same time, and the communities and lives of billions of people depend on the work that we do.
As we convene to adopt the new development agenda, let me commend the member states and every other stakeholder all of whom have patiently engaged in the negotiations, whose culmination is this visionary, transformative, and ambitious blueprint. Let me also thank you for the confidence that you have shown in Kenya in bestowing on my country the honor of co-chairing the intergovernmental process that led to this outcome. I believe the adoption of these goals will galvanize global action towards ending poverty in all its forms. 15 years ago, at the Millennium Summit, we adopted the Millennium Declaration, and through this declaration, we adopted the Millennium Development Goals, through which we undertook to exert all efforts to reduce extreme poverty by the year 2015. Since then, we have made significant progress in poverty reduction. Many of the MDGs have been achieved. Between 1990 and 2002, for example, there were overall incomes rose and sharp falls in the numbers of people living in extreme poverty, as well as child mortality rates. Life expectancy rose from 63 to nearly 65. An additional 8% of the developing world's people received access to water, while an additional 15% acquired access to improved sanitation services. Similarly, over 100 million people have been uplifted from slums. We know that today more girls than ever before are going to schools at all levels. More women are joining the ranks of formal employment. I also note that the spread of HIV/AIDS is being reversed, with new infections falling by 40% between the year 2000 and 2013. Important milestones have also been reached in the fight against malaria and tuberculosis. Similarly, efforts to manage the global environment have been accelerated, with significant reductions reported in the reduction of ozone-depleting substances. However, we must acknowledge that progress has been uneven across the world and across the goals. There remain still huge disparities between and within countries. Within countries, rural poverty remains unacceptably high, while urban poverty is extensive and underreported by traditional indicators. In some parts of sub-Saharan Africa, child and maternal mortality are rising. Even where progress has taken place, consumption patterns and their impact on the environment are unsustainable. The world continues to be under threat from the negative impacts of global warming and climate change. Millions of people worldwide still lack access to quality education as well as health care. Mr. President, in Kenya, we have made tremendous progress over the last decade. For instance, since the adoption of free universal primary education in the year 2003, gross enrollment rates have risen from 88% to 116%. Even more significantly, we have now achieved gender parity in the primary school cycle, while the transition from primary to secondary and tertiary levels have greatly improved.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Financing will be a key test. I welcome the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the renewed pledge by developed countries to invest 0.7% of gross national income in official development assistance. Aid works, but few countries have met this target. I salute those that have and urge others to follow their example. Climate finance will be crucial. I urge developed countries to meet the agreed goal of $100 billion per year by 2020. We must also get the Green Climate Fund up and running. Over the past 70 years, we have helped to liberate millions of people from colonialism and supported the successful struggle against apartheid. We have defeated deadly diseases, defended human rights, and deepened the rule of law. This and more we have done, but that is far from enough. We are living through a time of severe test, but also one of great opportunity. Today we are more connected than ever, better informed than ever, and have better tools than ever. The recipes for positive change are on the table. The ingredients for success are in our hands. We continue to reform the United Nations, although we know we must do much more, both managerially and politically. We can draw strength from the empowerment of women, but we still need to step it up for gender equality on the way to Planet 50 to 50. We can draw strength from the empowerment of women, but we still need to step it up for gender equality on the way to Planet 50 to 50. Response is working with the lessons pointing to a safer future for all. When we stand together, there is no limit to what we can achieve.
Future generations of young people watching today and tomorrow will judge us by the choices we make in the months and years ahead. And one of those young people is Eva Tulage. Eva lives in a village in Tanzania. She's 15 years old, and she wrote me a letter. Some of you know I get 10 letters a day, mostly from inside the United States, but sometimes international letters. I get 40,000 a day, but I read 10. And so Eva told me about her parents, farmers who struggle to provide for their 7 children. And this young 15-year-old girl, a girl the age of my daughters, she dreams of going to college, but with little food to eat, she explained how it's hard for her sometimes to concentrate in school. She explained that her house doesn't have electricity, so it's hard for her to study at night. It's not because her parents don't love her and don't have ambitions for her. Her father works incredibly hard in the fields to pay for her education. But they just need a little help. I won't let him down, Eva said. I'll do whatever it takes, she said in her letter. And then, knowing that we would be gathered at this summit to help lift up families like hers, she asked me a question that could be asked of all of our nations. What will you commit to doing? What will you do? And there are billions of boys and girls just like Eva. They're just like our children. They have as much talent and as much hope for the future. And they're willing to work hard. And their parents love them just as much as we love ours. And just by the accident of birth, it's so much more difficult for them to achieve their dreams as it is for our children. But in the eyes of God, they are the same children. They're just as important. And for Eva and all those just trying to survive another day in conditions that many of us can barely imagine, it can sometimes seem as if the world is blind to their struggles and their dreams. And so today I say to Eva and hundreds of millions, billions like her, we see you, we hear you. I've read your letter. And we commit ourselves as nations, as one world, to the urgent work that must be done. to standing with families like Eva's as they work and strive for a better life, to ending the injustice of extreme poverty, to upholding the inherent dignity of every human being, whatever it takes. We cannot let them down. And with your help, we won't.
My government has also introduced several measures to promote gender mainstreaming. For example, by legislation and government policy, 1/3 of all public appointments and legislative positions are reserved for women. The government has also set aside such funds as the Women Enterprise Fund, as well as the Uwezo Fund, to advance the cause of women entrepreneurship. My country also reserved at least 30% of all procurements in the public sector for women, youth, and people living with disability. We continue to promote appropriate skills to increase women and youth employment. In the health sector, we have eliminated user charges for maternity services in our public health facilities. My government is also providing free antiretroviral drugs and voluntary counseling and testing services, all part of a sustained national campaign against sexually transmitted diseases. That mix of preventative and curative measures has ensured important gains in the health of our nation. The rate of immunization for children under a year old, for instance, has risen to 85%, while HIV and AIDS infections have fallen to 6%. Mr. President, the lessons learned from the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals shows that much can be achieved when the world finds focus around a shared and common goals. The new agenda we adopt today is an ambitious plan for collective action to transform the fate of humanity by lifting all people out of poverty while remaining in harmony with our planet. Many of the goals of the post-2015 development agenda strongly resonate with Kenya's development aspirations as articulated in our development blueprint we call Vision 2030. We are convinced that under this agenda, a world free of poverty and hunger is achievable within the next 15 years. We also believe that a world in which development is in harmony with nature is also possible. The vision on environment is therefore correctly rooted in the agenda as a prerequisite of moving our societies towards sustainable development. The goals of this agenda are extremely ambitious. They require, therefore, an equally ambitious means of implementation. Without adequate resources for diverse places and institutions, the agenda that we adopt today might never be realized. Of course, we recognize that the primary responsibility for development in our countries shall first and foremost lie with us. However, resources from our development partners will also be critical. I urge them to substantially increase the resources that are available to developing countries as ODA. In addition, we should all address issues that have in the past impeded developing countries from channeling adequate resources to the needs of the poor. I believe that addressing debt sustainability and trade reforms will go a long way in addressing these needs. After all, trade is at least as good a means of ending poverty as aid. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my statement, I reiterate once again that the success of today's agenda in the years ahead will require new ideas and courage, effective mobilization of resources, in the context of a global partnership will be critical in this effort. I am therefore happy to announce that towards this end, Kenya will host the second high-level meeting on the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation in November of 2016, and I am happy to welcome all of you to this important meeting, and I believe this will provide us with an important forum to exchange ideas on how to move this agenda forward. Finally, I join the global community in adopting this important agenda, and I thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Very interesting thoughts there. I hope you feel fully informed about what the SDGs are. To achieve them, we must all play a role. Let's get straight to your views now.
This week we asked you, how can Africa's resources, creativity and dynamism be better harnessed for the benefit of all Africans? Henry Obonya says, Africa's creativity, resources and dynamism can be harnessed to better all Africans by ensuring there is a significant reduction in violent conflict, increased peace and stability coupled with advances in democratic governance.
Hi, my name is Rachel Nafula from Nairobi County, and I am watching Africa Leadership Dialogue. As a young person, I believe that our level of education supersedes that of our predecessors, making us be able to tap into Africa's resources. Therefore, young Africans should take up the mantle of leadership so as to create dynamic solutions.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD, and on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
Thank you for sharing your perspectives. We appreciate your feedback and your continuous engagement on social media platforms. Time now for Africa's Top 10.
This week on Africa's Top 10, we feature states with the best acceleration in MDG performance. The objective of the research was to ascertain the progress made by African countries in terms of the MDGs, which include poverty eradication, achievement of universal primary education, promotion of gender equality and empowerment of women, reduced child mortality, improvement of maternal health, combating HIV and AIDS, malaria and other diseases, environmental sustainability and development of a global partnership for development. The 22 indicators used to rank the countries are based on the 8 MDGs. This is according to the UNDP. Starting us off at number 10 is Lesotho with an accelerated progress in 13 of the 22 indicators accessed. Coming in at number 9 is Kenya. The East African state showed progress in 13 of the 22 indicators featured. Positioned at number 8 is Cote d'Ivoire. Of the 22 indicators, the West African country showed progress in 13 of them. Taking the number 7 spot is Burundi. The landlocked East African state has 13 of its indicators showing progress of the total 22. Slotted in at number 6 is Zambia with 14 of its indicators showing progress. At number 5 is Tanzania, another East African country with 14 of its indicators showing continuous progress. Rwanda takes the number 4 spot. The land of 1,000 hills had 15 of its indicators showing tremendous progress. Anchored in at number 3 is Namibia. The South African country showed progress in 16 of the 22 indicators. Coming in at number 2 is Mozambique, which had 16 of its indicators showing progress. And at number 1 this week is Burkina Faso. The West African state had 16 of its indicators showing a steady progress. And that's Africa's Top 10 this week.
And now we close with our African proverb. And this week it reads, "When the roots of a tree begin to decay, it spreads death to the branches." If our foundations are decaying, our societies will not thrive. They may not even survive. So let's get it right at the foundation. Blessings to you and blessings to Africa.